Hello and welcome back to a new series called A Challenger's Thoughts. Now, because I'm a full-time uni student, producing consistent guides is very difficult for me because they take upwards of 10 hours. So this is a new series that I wanted to start where I can more consistently make videos, but the editing is going to be a lot lower. However, the quality and information is going to remain the same. So in this video, in the first episode, I'm going to be talking about the top TFT meta augments. So in case you guys didn't know, you can use a site such as Meta TFT to track augment win rates. And so in today's video, I'm going to be talking about why some of the ones that are S tier are so far up the top, any anomalies or any other thoughts that I have on some of the other ones that maybe should be higher or lower. Because remember guys, data can be misleading. So for that reason, you don't want to take the win rates verbatim. However, it's good to know why certain augments lie where they are. Okay, so starting out in the silver tier, we have the Jade Crest. Now, Jade Crest is by far one of the best silver tier augments because it allows you to run 6 Jade in the mid game. And because your tempo, it usually allows you to go fast 8, as 6 Jade is stable enough during stage 3, and sometimes even stage 4, so you can usually go 8 on 4-2. And then the Jade Crest allows you to fit in 9 Jade at 8 very, very easily, and then that's a stable board until you get Raka, and it can usually allow you to fast 9. The reason that Jade Crest is a little bit worse than Jade Heart is just because you can't fit 9 Jade in at 7, so remember not to roll too deep on 7 as you want to go 8 when you're playing around Jade Crest. Shimmer Scale Crest at 2-1 is really strong, just because if you get anything other than the needlessly big gem, then you're going to get a ridiculous amount of incon, and for a silver augment it's just way too much. Scale Scorn Heart, you pretty much only take this if you're playing around the Scale Scorns, and if you get Scale Scorn Heart into another Scale Scorn augment and you can get 6 Scale Scorn online, then 6 Scale Scorn in this patch right now is completely broken. The only problem with Scale Scorn Heart right now is if you're stuck on 4, then it doesn't feel that good, and I don't think Olaf's in an insane spot right now, but I think usually when you're playing around Scale Scorn Heart as your first augment, there's a pretty decent chance you're going to get 6 online. Cybernetic Uplink's just really good because of how much value it generates for all of your mana casters. You just spread out your components as you don't really need full items on your secondary carries. And because of the way that AP casters work this set, for example with like Sona, Zoe, you don't actually care too much about having lots of items on them. It's more just like you'd want a Shojin on them, and that's pretty much what Cybernetic Uplink is doing. So you don't really need extra damage items on them, you just want them to be casting as frequently as possible. TG is really high because TG got buffed 2 patches ago, I think it was. So you get a lot better items during the mid game, so taking it early is just really strong. Meditation similar to Cybernetic Uplink's really good. Exiles is fine. Now, Built Different 1 is actually really strong because the thing about Built Different 1 is it's only slightly worse than Built Different 2. And so for a silver augment, you're getting almost the stats of a gold. And so you get to play in a lobby that's much weaker, but you have a consistent placement because you're just playing around Xayah, Corki, and then whatever other units you hit. And it's not actually that bad to run Built Different until the end game, and there are a few different variations you can play around it. Weak Spot's obviously really good because you need anti-heal in every single board. This allows you to just run ZZ Rots or Warmogs instead of running your Sunfire Morello, because if you don't have anti-heal, you lose really hard into a lot of matchups, so Weak Spot's obviously just solid for that. I'm probably just going to stop on the S and the A tier augments there. If there's anything in the B and C that I think is a bit of an outlier, then I'll talk about it. But for the majority of the B augments, you're only really taking it if it fits your board, and then it's pretty solid. I think Late Game Specialist is a bit of an outlier. It's rated at 4.48, but the only reason that it's actually as high as it is because you should only really be taking it when you're in a really good spot. I'd say in most scenarios, Late Game Specialist is actually a little bit of a bait. So it's artificially higher because the only people who are taking it are the ones who think that they can proc it. But if you're just considering how strong it is in general, then it's pretty weak and should actually be a bit lower. I think Pandora's is really low, just because most people don't know how to play around it. Pandora's is actually one of the better silver tier augments, but the problem with Pandora's is a lot of people like to greed for best in slot with Pandora's, when the value can actually be extracted by getting some really powerful items early, and then you can even remake them later. But you shouldn't be greeding for best in slot damage items when you can guarantee that you're going to get them later. I'd say the biggest problem with Pandora's here is that, let's say someone wants to play Deja, then they start greeding for the Archangels, Giant Slayer, Jewel Gauntlet, i.e. those items, before they actually even worry about getting frontline items, when it's much better to just play around Pandora's, play flexible tank items during the early and mid game, and then you can guarantee that you're going to get your best in slot items later. So I think they pay Pandora's items way too greedy, and it's for that reason that it's rated so low. Preparation 1, I think Preparation is really strong this patch, mainly just because they changed the AD system, so AD is a lot more valuable on your units. They also nerfed Stand United, so if you know how to play around Preparation 1 and you actually slot it into your units, remember that you can bench your carries during the neutrals to get free preparation stacks. And when you pair your main carries, you can usually get 1 to 2 stacks anyway, and then when you 2-star them, they combine, and so you're guaranteed to get 2 stacks from when you pair your units, and then you can guarantee another 2 stacks from neutrals, and actually you're getting basically like Stand United 2 value from a silver augment, and it's actually really strong. The reason that's rated so low is because people play around preparation 1 usually probably just play reroll, and I think reroll's pretty weak right now. But everything else looks fine in silver. Okay, so moving on to the gold augment, starting off with Cluttered Mind. This augment's just OP. If you ever get Cluttered Mind, just take it. You just push fast 8, and then you can roll on 8, and you're still going to be guaranteed fast 9. The amount of money you get from Cluttered Mind is just ridiculous. It's basically plus 3 gold every turn. You have to hold 1 gold on your bench, so it's essentially just plus 2. If you compare that to something like Trade Sector, you could in theory just roll every single turn, and then you've got Trade Sector on rounds that you want it, and you can just get plus 2 gold on the rounds that you don't. So yeah, it's just way too OP. Reckless Spending is artificially higher because you only really take this when you're in a high roll position playing around Shimmer Scale. And if you have Reckless Spending and you already have a pretty good item holder who's holding on to a Shimmer Scale item, for example, Draven's Axes or Goldmancer stuff, the extra damage buff that you get on, let's say, like a Corki or a Swain or a Zaya as your backline DPS is ridiculous. I think Reckless Spending, it probably shouldn't be rated so high. Only take it if you're in a really good spot. But yeah, that's the reason. Also, guys, when I say rated high, I do know that it's talking about average placement, but that's just the wording that I was using. Beast Den is really strong when you're playing around Elise or Swain. Usually I don't like taking Beast Den at 2-1 because it's a little bit awkward in stage 2 and 3. But if you get this augment later and you're already playing around it, then yeah, it's solid. Build Different 2, the same as Build Different 1, just a little bit better. I really like Build Different 2. I think it's pretty solid this patch. You just take it, play a solid win streak board. Only really take it if you have 80 items though. It doesn't really work when you're playing around AP carries. Assassin Crest is fine. It just allows you to play Sins during the early game and then you pivot into like Sin Siphon. You can't even go for a Pike carry or Sin Yasuo. The biggest problem I have with Sin Crest is sometimes during the mid game it can be weak if people aren't playing back to front comps, but you can flex between Sin Siphon and Sin's Jiuyu most of the time on level 8. So I think it's just pretty solid. Clear Mine is basically just a worse Cluttered Mine. It's still fine. I would only really take Clear Mine if you already have a few upgrades that you can push levels and it's a lot easier to stabilize. However, the problem with Clear Mine is you can't hold onto your pairs. So for that reason, if you don't have any upgrades, it's a little bit risky to take it. Scorch is OP, really strong on Set and really strong on Swain. If you have the items for either of these units, then definitely take Scorch and just hard force those comps. Big Friend 2, I'm surprised it's as high as it is. I think it's only because you only take Big Friend 2 when you're playing around a very front-loaded comp. Otherwise, Big Friend 2 doesn't work in a lot of boards because it's very hard to get maximum value out of it. So I think it's artificially higher because you're only really taking it when you're in a position to use it. Usually when you have a lot of belt items, then you can get value on everyone. Cybernetic Uplink 2, same as 1, is really strong. If we move down a little bit, Cavalier Crest. So Cavaliers, this patch is really strong. Volibear's a solid comp. If you get a Cavalier Crest, you can pretty much hard force the comp. Also, if you're playing around Deja, then you can play Cavalier Crest and eventually it goes on your Yasuo. And so Cavalier Crest, this patch is just really solid. Dragon Horde, obviously Dragon Alliances and Dragon Horde is one of the ways to cap your board the highest when you're in a position to use it. However, don't get baited into playing all of the dragons. You usually only want to play 2 dragons when you're playing around Dragon Horde, but sometimes you can play 3, of course. Jade Heart, similar to Jade Crest, is really good. The advantage of Jade Heart is that you can run 9 Jade on level 7, so you can roll deep if you have to, and yeah, it's really strong to play around 9 Jade during stage 4, of course. Gadget Expert, you get a free static shiv and it increases the damage. Usually only want to take Gadget Expert as your first or second augment, but yeah, there's a lot of comps that can utilize this really well, with Swain being one of them. Mirage Crest, artificially higher because you're only really taking Mirage Crest when it's actually a good Mirage variant. Usually that's going to be Warlords or Dawnbringer, and yeah, Deja's really strong this patch, so it's no surprise that that one's also in S tier. Okay, so if we move down, Guardian Crest is pretty good. The reason that it's rated so highly is because Corki's a really solid comp right now, and if you take the Guardian Crest, you can play around 4 Guardian during the mid game, and then late game, you only have to run Idis, so it's kind of like a Fawn, you get an extra unit. That being said though, running a Braum 2 is actually a pretty solid frontline to share with your Idis, but this just allows you to run an extra Legendary, and especially when you're playing around Corki, that's really significant. Heroic Presence, I think this is artificially higher because you're only playing around it when you're playing the Guardian rerolls. It works really well in the Yone board. However, I don't think I rate it that highly when you're playing around Corki board, so usually only play this augment when you're playing around reroll Guardians. It can also work if you're playing Tristana reroll because you usually 3-star your Braum. Dragon Alliance is the same as Dragon Horde, pretty much the exact same augment. Triforce 2. I'm not a big fan of this augment. I'm surprised that it's rated so highly. I think it's mainly just because you play it when you're playing around Volibear and Varus. And I think if you get stat buffs on your Varus, then Varus is a pretty solid comp right now. But mainly probably Volibear's just bringing this up because you're playing around Volibear and a Nivea carry, so that just makes it really solid. But otherwise, Triforce feels a little bit weak if you're playing around the other 3 costs, to be honest. Shimmer Scale Heart, I think you only really take this maybe late game when you're going for vertical shimmers. Or if you know that the Shimmer Scale augment item is really good. Because the problem with Shimmer Scale Heart at 1-4 is if the Shimmer Scale item's bad, you're playing down a gold augment. Whereas Shimmer Scale Crest is a lot more safe. So it's for this reason that Shimmer Scale Heart is definitely worse than Shimmer Scale Crest for that reason. Exiles 2, just solid, just a little bit more frontline if you need it. Now, Devastating Charge, you only really take this in if you're in a very specific spot to use it. If you're, for example, playing the Deja board and Deja is your main source of DPS, you don't need Devastating Charge, it's just extra damage. So try and stay away from this augment for that reason. But I think it's rated quite highly because if you're playing around the Cavalier reroll, for example, around Lilia, or if you're playing just vertical calves in general, then it can add quite a lot of damage. But you do need to be careful not to get baited into this augment when you don't need extra DPS from your calves. Also, one thing to note with this augment is if you front row your calves, they don't actually get the charge off. So even though they get the extra stats, they won't do the devastating charge. So make sure not to front row your calves when you're playing this augment. Best Friends 2 is solid. The attack speed and armor is really good. You usually only take this in AD heavy lobbies, but it's really, really solid when you're playing around things like Varus, Xayah, Corki, anything that's AD base. Portable Forge, always a solid pick. There's a lot of items that can be used in pretty much all comps, and you get 3 choices, so you usually won't get anything that's too bad. Scale Scorn Crest is A tier, mainly similar to before. I was saying that you only really take this when you're playing around 4 or 6 Scale Scorn. And 6 Scale Scorn is really, really strong, so I think this is artificially higher because you're usually only taking this when you think you can get 6, or if this is the one that gets you to 6. Stand United 2 is solid, works really well in a lot of the vertical comps because you want to be running the legendaries such as Zoe, Bard, Raka, just all the ones that give you an extra trait anyway. So you get really good Stand United value. Hallucinate's just solid just because Deja's really strong right now. Usually you only play Deja around Dawnbringer and Warlords, and when you're playing those variants, you don't technically need Hallucinate because you already have a decent amount of frontline. However, if you're playing, for example, the Spell Sword or Executioner's Deja, then sometimes Hallucinate can be good because you just lack a little bit of frontline, and usually you're playing Archangel's Deja, so this allows Deja to ramp up a bit more. Cybers is really, really strong when you're playing around the AD boards. Guild Crest is solid because Nomsy buffs recently. So if you get the Guild Crest, you actually get Omnivamp on your Nomsy, which Nomsy doesn't have any built-in healing, so it makes a big difference. And so when you get the Guild Crest, you can play around vertical guilds, and you can dual carry Nomsy and Rise. There's a few different variations to it, but yeah, I think Guild Crest is solid just because of the Nomsy buffs. Shell, a little bit of armor, a little bit of HP is solid. Now, Party Favors is artificially higher because it's a ridiculous augment if you have a Revel Spat for your Deja, or if you're already in a high roll position with Corki and you can just go fast 8, fast 9. Don't take this augment if you're in a lose streak position, as it won't save you. But I do think that this augment is it's rated a little bit too high just because it's only taken when you're in a winning streak position. If we look at Evoker Crest, I really do not like Evoker Crest because the problem with it mainly is that you already want to run Lulu Sona in most of your boards, and then if you're playing around ASOL, then you want to run Lulu ASOL anyway. So it's very rare that you actually want to run 4 Evoker because you have to run usually an extra dead unit. And then it's rare that you also only want to run 1 Evoker. But yeah, I don't think Evoker Crest should be rated this highly. I think mainly just because if you're in a win streak position and you're playing around AP units, you can Evoker your Zoe, which is a lot of value. But a lot of the time you don't want to pick up Evoker Crest. Definitely not at 1-4. Maybe at 4-2 if it fits your board. But I'd say that 4 Evoker is pretty bait because you'd rather just play 2 Evoker and then just run 3 mages. So for this reason that I'm surprised it's a little bit rated this highly, but it's probably just because people are only picking it up when they think it fits their board. Electrocharge 2 is solid if people aren't playing back to front comps. Otherwise, I think Electrocharge is just like a pretty meh augment. Press attacks pretty good when you're playing around Varus. The extra true damage is really nice. You can run 4 Swift Shot during the mid game and then pivot back into 2. Intercosmic Gifts got buffed in the last patch, so you're getting a lot more econ. And so yeah, I think it's for this reason that it's just pretty solid because you 3-star your Nami, get a lot of gold, and then you're guaranteed a pretty safe placement with the 3-star Nami. And then Better Together, mainly just playing around Deja and or Volibear. If you play Volibear with Better Together and you get more than 1 Chalice, you're in an insane spot. And Volibear 2-star can even top 4. And then Better Together with Deja is also pretty solid as well, because you just solo frontliner, with ZZ Rot, and then Better Together your backline. Okay, so moving on to all of the other augments, I'm just going to talk about any outliers that I think I see. Otherwise, yeah. I think Hotshot being B is a little bit surprising. I think Hotshot's a very, very solid augment. It might just be that people take hot shot and hard force it, so they get lower placements for that reason, or they try and play vertical cannoneers. It says that center uses hot shot a lot here when you really don't need it, but I think hot shot should be a little bit higher on average. Hustler's C, 4.7. I think a lot of people don't know how to play Hustler. Personally, I think it's actually a pretty fine augment if you know how to play tempo. The thing about Hustler is that a lot of people get wrong is previously with Hyperroll in the previous set, you had to stay below 10 gold, which meant that you were only making +2 gold every turn. With Hustler, you can actually make +3 gold every turn if you stay above 10. So the way to play Hustler is you want to try and make your first 10 very, very quickly, and then stay on 10 gold for pretty much the rest of the game. Until you get to stage 4, you can actually make go from 10 all the way up to 40. You can make 40, 50 for a couple of turns, and then go fast 8 and stay on 10 gold again. The way you play Hustler is you need to abuse the fact that you should be 1 level above the curve, and you should be getting better shop odds and play tempo. But I think a lot of people just don't make 10 gold for some reason on Hustler, and so they lose out on a lot of econ that they could have otherwise had, and they just don't know how to play the augment, and so then they're just greeting. You don't want to treat it like a hyper-roll game. You want to make sure that you're playing tempo and pushing levels. Okay, so moving on to the Prismatics, I'm surprised that Tempest Crown is rated at #1 right now, but if I go look over at frequency, it's only been picked 30 times, so I think that's the reason that it's rated so highly, is just because people are picking it in a very, very niche scenario. I think there is potential for an 8 Tempest comp, but yeah, I think it's a little bit hard to say that this augment is consistent, and you should be taking it every time. They did change it to get a Shiv, so I guess that's nice. Whisper's Crown, on the other hand, I'm not surprised that this is S tier. This is because Whisper's Deja is really, really strong. And when you're rolling on 8, if you don't happen to hit the Deja and you hit Siphon instead, you can actually play Siphon Corki. And 6 Whispers Corki is no joke, because Corki has AD and AP scaling. So you just go Rageblade Whispers Corki +1, and Corki's going to do a ridiculous amount of damage. And the Siphon Corki board's actually pretty solid anyway. So it's not like you're bending the board in order to make it fit. Otherwise, you just play around Whispers Deja, and both are really, really solid. It also gives you a free Titans and a free Silas. So if you get this early into the game, that makes a big difference. You can get Silas 2 online quite quickly. And yeah, it's just a solid augment in general. Jade Soul, very similar to all of the Jade augments before. You get a free extra Jade heart as well as a Titans, which is best in slot and Shiryu. You get to play around 6 Jade during the mid game. You can go roll deep on 7 if you need to, otherwise fast 8, get 9 Jade. Very solid starter pack if you want to play around Jade. Cavalier Crown is, again, pretty solid just because Cavaliers are so strong this patch. You can play around Volibear or you can play Deja, both of which are really meta right now, so it's no surprise that these this is rated so highly. Now, Assassin Crown, similar to before, it seems that when people pick Assassins, they seem to just do well. They did change it, so you no longer get an IE, instead you get a Hodge, which is a pretty significant nerf. However, Hodge is a fine item for Assassins anyway, and so you can play around Sin Olaf reroll, or you can push levels and play around Shiryu Assassin or Siphon Assassin. I think it's just that you also get a free Diana, so your mid-game's guaranteed to be 4 Sins with the Hodge as well, so that's pretty solid. I don't really take this if you have good AD components though, but if you get an IE plus a Sin Spat, you're already 2 out of 3 best in slot on whatever you decide to carry. Guardian Crown is solid, similar to before. The thing that makes Guardian Crown and his Prismatic so good is you get a free Braum and you get a free Gargoyles. So Gargoyles is best in slot on Idis in the late game. And you can play around 4 Guardians, and if you get an early Braum 2 with Gargoyles, you're basically guaranteed to go fast 8, and then you can pivot into Idis and just drop down to just 2 Guardians. Guardian Spat your Yasuo or something else that you want to throw on, and yeah, that's really solid. Cruel Pack, this patch is a lot stronger because now you actually regen health. So basically what you're doing is you're going fast 7 and then you're just rolling down for a solid board. Once you stabilize, you can stop rolling, but usually you're just playing around Jade because it's the safest. Because on 7 you can play 6 Jade, and then you can 3-star your Anivia because you're going to be rolling on 7 for pretty much most of the game, and then eventually you will go 8. And so yeah, the way that they changed Cruel Pack is it's just solid. Also with the Jade board, if you do get lucky enough to get a Raka, then you're going to be regenerating health a lot more quickly, and then of course you can use that to push levels again. Cybernetic Uplink, no different to the other ones, just really solid. Same with Implants, these are just solid augments. You just spread your components during the early and mid game, and then eventually they're going to have a lot of value, especially when you're playing around AD or AP, depending on which one you choose, of course. Scalescorn Crown, great starter pack to play around Scalescorn. As we're seeing a common theme here, 6 Scalescorn is really strong this patch, so if you can play around that and then get another augment, you're going to be in a really good spot. Now moving on to the A tier, so with Triforce 3, again, Varus and Volibear, really strong if you can give them some more stat buffs, so for this reason that it's rated quite highly. I wouldn't really play around any of the other 3 costs too often. Cavalier Unity is a pretty solid augment if you're playing around the Deja board. You get a free Cavalier on your Yasuo if you can get that online. Otherwise, it also works quite well in the Olaf comp. You can play around Scale Scorns, and then you give Cavalier to all of your 4 to 6 Scale Scorns, which is really, really strong. Now, Ragewind Crown is actually rated quite highly here, and I think it's because people are learning how to play the Swain comp a little bit more. It's basically a starter pack to play Swain, and then you push levels and get into Shyvana. If you haven't seen, my last video was actually a guide on how to play Swain, and that talks about everything you need to know about playing the comp, and so Ragewind Crown allows you to pretty much hard force the comp if you have another item for Swain as well. Best Friends 3 is same as Best Friends 1 and 2, just a solid augment, some really good stat buffs. Cybernetic Shell will only really take this if you think that you need the armor, but otherwise solid as well. Now, Living Forge scales really well. I'm not a huge fan of Living Forge unless I think that I can use all of the items in my opener. You can get Mort Dogged and get some really bad Living Forge items later. However, generally speaking, it's a pretty solid item because all of the Ornn items are fine. The only downside to it is if you get really unlucky, you get Mana Zane when you don't need it, get Gold Collector later into the game, then yeah, it can be a little bit bad. Now, Guild Crown is solid this patch because you're playing around vertical guilds. You're carrying Rise and Nomsy, and I had a game where I took Guild Crown. I already had a Shojin. You get a free Rise. So you get a free Rise with a Giant Slayer. If you already have an Archangels or a Shojin, your Rise is going to be able to carry you through stage 2 and 3. And then you can roll down at 7 if you think that you need to for 2-star Rise, push level 8. And you just have solid tempo throughout all of the game because leveling for the next guild unit at each level spikes your board a lot. Now with Evoker Crown, the spat is pretty meh. However, you get a free Shojin as well. So if you get Evoker Crown and you already get dropped a Rise early, you can just play Evoker Shojin Rise, which dishes out a ridiculous amount of damage. And then you can push levels, and then you can play around either Evoker Zoe, or you can go Evoker Aoshin. Golden Egg, artificially higher because you only take this when you're in a spot where you think that you can cash it out. I actually don't think the egg is that great because usually you're not going to be that stable on stage 4. But let's say that you center on 4-1, level 7. That's when it's a good time to take egg. Or if you're just high rolling and you think you can send it and spike your board. Shimmer Scale Soul is really, really risky because you're just getting a free Titans. The benefit of the extra crest, you could just get that out of a silver augment. So I actually don't rate Shimmer Scale Soul that high. I think you only really take it when you're in a really, really good spot to use it, or you know that the Shimmer Scale item is good. Otherwise, I would try and stay away from Shimmer Scale Soul. Mirage Crown's solid just because Deja is so strong this patch. You get a free Hodge, which is nice. It can go on Yasuo, it can go on Deja. But I think Mirage Crown's actually a little bit weak unless you really want to hard force Deja and you're in a good spot to do so, and the Mirage is good. The free Nunu is nice as well because it allows you to fit 4 Mirage during the early game. Then you just Hodge your Yasuo and it's very easy to go fast 8 and pivot into Deja. But if the Mirage is weak, then definitely don't take this. So if we look at some of the other ones, I wanted to point out that Level Up and High-End Shopping, I think that Level Up is, it's only 4.44, just because a lot of people, when they play this augment, if they don't have upgrades early, they just push levels, and then it just griefs their odds of hitting pairs. Another way to play Level Up is actually you can go 5 loss, make good econ, and then push levels aggressively. Remember guys, that stage 2 is when you lose the least amount of HP, so don't ruin your econ when you're playing Level Up during stage 2 unless you have a really good opener. So I think Level Up is actually should be rated a little bit higher, but a lot of people just push levels, don't natural their upgrades, and then you don't really want to roll on 7. But Level Up's a solid augment because you're guaranteed level 7 a lot quicker than everyone else, and then you're 8 on stage 4 and 9 on stage 5, which is really solid. I think Verdant Veil is really good when you're playing around units that need the CC protection, like they want to run QSS anyway. The problem I have with Verdant Veil is you're playing down an entire Prismatic just to get a QSS on one of your units for free. And most of the other units in your board don't really need the Verdant Veil, so that's why I think that Verdant Veil deserves to be quite low. I think Mage Crown could be a little bit higher, but people get baited into playing around vertical mages. The advantage of Mage Crown is you can easily fit in 3 mage. You get a free Silas and a free Shojin, which is best in slot for a lot of units. But yeah, just make sure when you're playing around Mage Crown, when you get to later stages, you're dropping the mages for Zoe, Silas, plus just the Mage Hat. You can run 5 mage if you mage your Alchin or your Asol to give it a little bit more AP. But most of the time, you just want to drop the mages for legendary units. Don't get baited into playing verticals. And that is the end of the first episode of A Challenger's Thoughts. I hope you guys did enjoy learning something about augments and their win rates. As always, thank you guys very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.